Good evening, and welcome to the premiere of our new Facebook series, Broadway Master Class at the Theater Talent Showcase. An evening of listening, laughing, and learning with the professionals who make the magic happen. I'm Marty Angstreich, founder of the Theater Talent Showcase Group, and your host for this evening's live stream. For those who may be unfamiliar with our group, the Theater Talent Showcase is a virtual stage for thespians, stage actors, and actresses to perform for their peers and for theater fans literally around the world. As a member, it's an opportunity to share your talents on Facebook with audiences who otherwise would never have the chance to see you perform, and that would be a shunda, a real shame. That music that you're listening to may be the most recognizable opening notes of any show in the history of musical theater. It was first heard on September 22nd, 1964 at the Imperial Theater and has been played literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times on stage and elsewhere in the last 56 years. It's a story that transcends generations and speaks to people of all religions and all walks of life. Tonight, the Theater Talent Showcase is honored and privileged to bring to you the reunion of the Off-Broadway cast of the National Yiddish Theater Folksbeine production of Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish. Hi, everybody. You can unmute now. That would be great.
Hey.
Shalom, shalom, was machst du?
Yeah.
Die ganze Mischbuche ist du. Hi.
Oh.
It's been a while.
So I promised the group that this would not be in Yiddish. People actually panic, like, we don't speak Yiddish. Don't worry.
They always do.
A man on the street to me today said, "Sei gesund." He had no idea I was Jewish.
Wow.
Are you sure, Bobby?
But you're from New York, so you're half, at least.
It's the bald, I think. That's what did it.
So anyway, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here tonight. How's everybody doing?
Good.
That's what we can.
Good. So our goal for this master class is to both educate and to entertain. And as we have a full agenda, I'm going to really get things started quickly by just going around the room and asking everyone to introduce themselves. You know, your name, the role or roles that you've played in the show, anything else you want to share with us, you know, whatever makes you happy is wonderful with me. Steven, let's start with you if you wouldn't mind.
All right, hello everyone out there in Facebook land. I'm Steven Skybell and I played Tevye in the Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof. And I did not speak Yiddish before I played him, and I still don't speak Yiddish.
Thank you for being here, Steven. Jennifer?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm Babiak. I started out playing Kayleen Seidl downtown at the Museum of Jewish Heritage for opening for a few weeks, and then I was understudying Golda, and I started playing the role a few weeks into opening downtown, and I continued on with the role as we moved uptown to stage 42. This was my first time speaking Yiddish as well, and I still don't speak it either.
Well, you could have all fooled us.
Yeah.
But thank you, Jack. Thank you. Bruce.
Hi there, I'm Bruce Savile. Speaking to you from Cantona, New York. I played Laser Wolf in the show, and sometimes if Steven had a cold, I would play Tevye. And I also did not speak Yiddish before the show. Although interestingly, my wife is doing Duolingo in her downtime right now and learning Spanish. And sometimes she'll have to say a sentence in Spanish, some rudimentary Spanish, and I'll see if I can actually say it in Yiddish. And sometimes I actually can. So I did learn a little bit of Yiddish.
Thank you.
Very little.
Abyssal. Thank you, Bruce. Kirk.
Hi, I'm Kirk Geritano. I played Avram, and I was also an understudy for Mottel, Mordcha, and Laser Wolf. And when I wasn't on stage, I was busy backstage winning the prize for fastest growing hair and beard. So that's my fun fact. And as you can see, it's back for quarantine. So, you know, doing what I can.
And you shaved that a week ago, which is really amazing that it's grown back.
This morning. It's
a little Bruce Almighty thing going through there.
Yeah.
And I do want to just give a quick special shout out to Kirk, who's one of the original members in our Theater Talent Showcase. for his assistance in pulling this together and getting the cast here. And thank you to everybody. But thank you, Kirk. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Samantha.
Hi, I'm Samantha Hahn, and I played Bielka in Fiddler on the Roof. And yeah, it was my off-Broadway debut, which was really cool.
Very cool. And we're actually going to talk a little bit more about that later, if you don't mind. So that'll be great. Kayleen?
Hi, I'm Kayleen, and I was in the ensemble and understudied Seidl, Huddle, and Chava. So I had fun doing party tricks, like saying all the lines by myself to Matchmaker, and did a little puppet show, which was fun. Kept me entertained. But yeah, so brain is very full of Yiddish. I feel like I probably still remember it somehow, probably from drilling it excessively. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. Adam.
Hi, I'm Adam B Shapiro. I played the rabbi, or Der Rov, in Fiddler on the Roof. I also understudied Tevye and Laser Wolf and Avram, though that was the one role I didn't end up going on for in its entirety, but that's a long story. I was also the official cake baker of Anatevka. I got to do several fun fiddler cakes throughout the run.
Nice. Did you bring any for us tonight?
It doesn't work through Zoom. It just doesn't.
One could only hope. But thank you for being here. James.
Hey, I'm James Monroe Števko. I was Adam's Zun. I played Mendel, his son, and I danced heavily as a Russian in L'chaim. I did not speak Yiddish before this, but I did study German and Czech, Slovak, and Russian before this, so it certainly helped.
Perfect. Thank you. Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Zatcoff, and I played Seidl, the oldest daughter. And I'm just happy to be here with this group. I can't think of a more joyful group of faces to be looking at right now. So I'm happy.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Bobby.
Hang on, I'm sorry. Rachel just made me cry. I'm Bobby Underwood. I played the constable. Yes, I'm Jewish. No, I did not speak Yiddish before this show.
Perfect. Thanks. Raquel.
Hi, I'm Raquel. I played Sprinza, who is the fourth youngest daughter of Tevye. I also understudied Huddle and went on once for that, which was super fun. And I spoke a little bit of Yiddish before this. Was that a question? Yes. But not too much. So I got a lot of Yiddish in Fiddler, which was super fun.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And Lydia.
Am I on? Yes. Okay.
You are.
So I was Bobet Seidl, and I understudied Shandel and Golda. I went on for Shandel actually the first week that I was in the show. I was a replacement. I never got to move uptown, but I had a glorious 3 months with all of these gorgeous punim in front of me. And I also speak German. So my biggest critique by our coaches was you have to say it the Yiddish way, not the German way, which is totally different. But I understood a lot of what I was saying right away. So that was great.
Perfect. Good. I think I hit everybody. Yes? Yes, I think we're good. Perfect. So I just want to put this out there. It's a common question. It's the question to ask. And I apologize if you've been asked this 1,000 times. But, Fiddler ended its off-Broadway run on January 5th, right before all the theaters wound up shutting down because of COVID-19. So just curious, what has everybody been doing to keep your sanity? Was anybody actually in the midst of starting up a new show or in the middle of an audition process for a show that might have been shut down? I'm just going to open this to the cast, so just jump right in if you would.
I've been doing Duolingo, Bruce, like Karen. I've been doing Spanish on the Duolingo. That's been fun. Got a good streak going. I'm trying to keep busy. I learned to play the ukulele. I'm just kind of revisiting a lot of different styles of music. Trying to keep busy and creatively fulfilled in this time, and reading a lot, binge watching some TV, but just keeping busy, But yeah, I wasn't working on another show before this. I feel, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I'm so grateful that we were able to complete our run and have a proper closing and party it up. So really, really grateful for that.
An interesting thing is that we were planning to start a tour of the show once we closed January 5th, and our first port of call was China. And so we got the message from China first and foremost that they didn't think necessarily that they could present us in the time frame that they had anticipated. And that's just as all this coronavirus was making itself known. And so it may have been a reason why it didn't happen. They didn't cite that as the reason, but for whatever reason, I'm thankful at this point that we didn't find ourselves in China at the time that we were meant to be there. And, you know, slowly but surely, everything that was meant to be after Fiddler on the Roof, that included Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish and other things, got postponed and then canceled, and then the reality set in. So, you know, Duolingo, and you know, it actually, I live north of the city, and I had filed for unemployment before this all hit. So in some ways, things hadn't changed once everything kind of went into lockdown. And you know, as long as one's able to stay creatively fruitful, which is the downtime of the performer, then it's been certainly not as awful as it probably would have been for me.
Got it. Just out of curiosity, since you mentioned that, has there been any talk at all of revisiting touring when, you know, there's some semblance of normalcy in our lives again?
There has been. I mean, I think the powers that be at this point, who can't really tell the future as well as anyone else, are hopeful that once a certain new normal hits, that Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish will have some travel in it. I certainly am hopeful for that. Who knows when that might be? Right. If you know, we may have aged out of our roles by then. You never know.
Only Sammy. The rest of us are all going to be the same age. So I have been, I actually was supposed to start a new off-Broadway play at the end of March. We never made it to our first rehearsal. We actually did have a reading. It was actually very nice that the producers organized a reading with the whole cast and all the creatives. So we actually got to see each other kind of the way you would on the first day of rehearsal. And it was nice to actually be able to read through the play with the whole cast. And do it for the director and the playwright, but who knows if that'll ever happen. I've been spending a lot of my time with these little guys. This is a mini DV tape, and we have dozens and dozens of them that range from about 2003 to 2010. And I decided to start a project of moving them all from these completely useless things onto actual digital media and into the cloud so that our whole family could actually see them. And we've been having a lot of fun sort of sharing clips among us and seeing what our kids were doing when they were like 4 years old.
Very cool.
So that's been fun. And
oh no, go ahead, Bruce. Sorry.
I've created this thing on online called Broadway Goes Viral, which is a site that allows performers to share their stuck-at-home videos with, you know, Instagram and Facebook users. It's been parodies and ballads and a cappella songs and duets and all kinds of really interesting things. We've gone a little quiet right now, given the mood of our nation. But I imagine that the purpose of Broadway Goes Viral will continue in some revised form.
Well, you know, you're all always welcome to join our Theater Talent Showcase group and perform for us. You know, we've got a nice sized audience. You know, they always appreciate a good performance. So
Awesome.
You know, keep that in mind if you ever get bored, you know, something else.
One thing.
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
No, go, Raquel. Go.
One thing that a few of us have been doing with the help of Sammy is learning sign language, which is so much fun. And so we meet once a week. So that's been a fun way to, just do something with a group of people we haven't seen in a while. And it's just 3 of us, but it's been really nice. And she's so good at it. So it's been super fun to do that.
Sam, how did you start that? Have you always done sign language, or?
Actually, I have a sign language kit, and I have a friend who does sign language pretty fluently. And we were trying to start to do it in the dressing room backstage at Fiddler, actually. Kayleen and Raquel and I were trying that, but it was so hard to do it like during the show because, we were doing the show.
Very cool. So I'm gonna move forward because I'm keeping an eye on the clock to make sure we can do everything we need to tonight. So let me just jump in. This is going to be a little self-serving, and I will absolutely hear no end of this from my wife and my kids after this broadcast. So, but I personally have just been incredibly excited about having this mishpucha here this evening, for a number of reasons. First, as I mentioned when we were kind of doing our warm-ups, this is just an amazingly talented cast. There is just so much talent and so much personality and so much what I as an audience member see as love for this story and what you brought to it, and the experience is incredible. So again, thank you so much for being here, and I'm going to keep saying this, so it's not rhetoric, I promise you, it's true. Secondly, growing up a nice Jewish boy in Brooklyn to a mother and grandparents that were Holocaust survivors from Poland, Fiddler on the Roof was really part of my DNA. It's the first cast album I remember seeing in my parents' record collection. It played constantly in my grandparents' home between listening to their Yiddish records and WEVD radio. And as a story dealing with anti-Semitism and family and traditions, it was a story that I heard secondhand from my family who lived this. So it has a very, very special place in my heart. And lastly, before I became a musician and a music director, I actually did a very little bit of acting, and Tevye was actually my first role I ever played. So, Steven, if these guys can't go on for you one night, you give me a call, I'll grow the beard, we'll be fine, it'll be wonderful. But so like I said, this is really all part of my DNA. So, Steven, I'm going to turn to you so we can really kick this into high gear. So, kind of as one Tevye to another, maybe you could tell our audience, a little bit, synopsis of the story of Fiddler auf dem Dach and in particular, this National Yiddish Theater Folksbeine production.
Well, the stories come from Shalom Aleichem, Tevye the Dairyman stories. So they were originally written in Yiddish. And so just after first I'll tell you the story of the Yiddish Fiddler, and then we can talk about plot should we need to. But just after the show opened on Broadway originally, a gentleman, an Israeli director actor named Shraga Friedman asked to please put it on in Israel in Yiddish, and he was granted permission. And it was an abysmal failure because at that time, Israel, being a newly minted country, was not interested in Yiddish and looking back towards that language of the shtetl, and so it didn't really succeed. And so the artistic director of the Folksbeine, our first producing theater, had a dream for a long time to mount that Yiddish Fiddler here in America. And so he finally, through tenacity and vision, saw it happen and magnificently and miraculously brought Joel Grey on board to be the director, because I mean, I do like to say that one of Joel Grey's greatest talents is casting, and he did cast an incredible group of people, and his vision. He had been cogitating about Fiddler on the Roof since he'd seen out-of-town tryouts of it before it moved to Broadway originally. And he had some deeply clarifying understanding of what this musical is. It's basically the story of a shtetl, a family, a group of people living together in the Pale settlement of Russia. And it's ostensibly about one man with his 5 daughters and his wife, of course, trying to get the first daughter married, then how the second daughter gets married, and the third of the 5th daughter gets married, becomes wedded. But in the scope of that is also world events that come crashing through for them. and they eventually are thrown out of their little town. Spoiler alert for anyone who doesn't know the story. But the thing that we felt as we were presenting it in Yiddish is that it really was striking a chord not only to Yiddish speakers and not only to Jewish people, but to people in general. And that I was fond of saying all along that people said, are you surprised that it became such a hit, really? And it was surprising that Yiddish was being produced commercially midtown in the theater district. But what's not surprising is that it was Fiddler on the Roof. And so everybody knew the bona fide hit that Fiddler on the Roof is. And one of the things that being inside it that feels so palpable is it is the story of a family, and then it's also the story of a people at the same time. And so it is absolutely relatable. And as sad as the current events are, and as homogenized as our company was in terms of our ethnicity, there is still a story to be learned from Fiddler on the Roof about what it is for intolerance and a racism to tear the world apart. So sad to say, 56 years later, the message of Fiddler on the Roof is still sadly relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. So I'm going to stick with you for just a second. So I'm just curious, and you mentioned about Joel Grey as this incredible casting director. How did you come to the production? Did you get a call from an agent? Did you see an open casting call in Variety? I mean, how did you come to this?
Well, I'm fond of telling this story, and I'll be brief about it. But I'm the type of actor in my life who has only found trouble when I try to pursue something that I've heard that is being done. It never leads to a happy result for me. So I've over my career have settled into whatever crosses my agent's desk. That's the thing I want to look at, because I don't necessarily want to try and pound the pavement for myself. But my better half saw on Facebook, of all places, that the National Yiddish Theater was doing a Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof directed by Joel Grey. So very out of character for myself, I called up my agent and I said, did you know they're doing a Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof? And he said, I like to tell this. He said, haven't heard anything about it. And I'm like, well, it's on Facebook, so you don't have to look very far. So he made some calls, and I had previously worked with Joel Grey. So I said to them, will you tell them that I have, one, worked with Joel Grey before, and two, I speak Yiddish, which was not true, but was true-ish, because I had studied Yiddish, but I couldn't really hold a conversation in Yiddish. So one thing led to another, and I auditioned for it, and they were, it was very frightening because the amount of Yiddish information that they wanted you to prepare for the audition. And I remember there was a note at the bottom of the sides that said, do us a favor, do yourself a favor, and listen to the tapes and prepare, because you are not going to walk into the room and wing a Yiddish audition. Right. And so I auditioned, and I had a callback, and then I was cast at it. And I'm also fond of telling the story that I had always been searching for an adult appropriate Fiddler on the Roof for me to play as an adult, because like you, Marty, my first Tevye was at 17. I did win Best Actor at National Music Camp, I'd like to tell everyone, but I was looking for an adult Tevye. And so I said, just my luck, I'm playing Tevye in Yiddish down at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. Who will see that? And, and so here we are. And a lot of people wanted to see it. And it actually, just for your audience, it was the experience of a lifetime for me. And in some ways, my entire life, without knowing it, was leading up to this experience. And so I am forever grateful for it, whether or not China's in our future. I'm very grateful for having done it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So before we get into some lighter questions, I want to take one serious note for a moment, and this is really for the cast. So, Fiddle on the Roof in any language, as you've mentioned, has really a worldwide appeal, for so many reasons. It's funny, it's loving, it's heart-wrenching, it's joyous. it's a story that virtually everyone can relate to. And as actors, the more ways we can find a way to relate to roles, I feel the more real and natural performance can be for the audience. You know, when you cry and the audience believes the tears are real, the audience will cry with you. And that engages and takes them to a completely different level. So I'm going to really, like I said, open this up to anyone, anyone who wants to speak briefly about, how you, and Stephen, we heard it from you, but, how you personally connected to the story of Fiddler and Dach. Did anybody have a connection, just walking into it that like, this is a story I know, this is a story I need to help tell?
I think for a lot of, I think for a lot of people, this is their story. This is the story of their families, of their ancestors. And that's not just for Jews, that's for everybody. One of the, one of the most amazing days was last April on World Refugee Day. We had an audience that we had corporate sponsors buy out the house so we could have an audience of refugees from various countries, Mexico, Russia, Honduras, multiple South American countries. Many of these people had never been to the theater before, and many of these people, English was not their first language, right, let alone Yiddish. So they had guides for everybody in various languages. And even with all the language barrier, it was amazing to see how many people saw their own stories in the plot of Fiddler on the Roof, some more recent than others. Mm-hmm. And so I think, I as far as personal experience, I can only speak for myself, but my grandfather, came over from Eastern Europe. My grandmother was first generation born in America. Her parents were Russian. And it's very, it's really cool to be able to tell a story that's so specific and yet so universal.
Great.
I'd like to chime in. There was also another day when we were downtown at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and a lot of us took a tour of the actual museum, which was basically bearing witness to the Holocaust. And there were 3 floors, and it was this beautiful, some ways terrifying, very realistic kind of exhibit. That really just hit home, I think, for everybody who went on that tour that day. And when we did the show that night, it really just brought a different flavor to it and a different realism to it, because, sometimes when you're doing a show, it's just, you're doing a show and you go about your day-to-day things. But when you experience something like that, and it really brings you back to the plight of the people in the show, and that they're very real people going through this very real, terrifying struggle. And just after experiencing that together, it just really hit it home for us. And I think it gave us a new way in mentally to the show and to the realism and the humanity of the show.
Great. Anyone else? Otherwise, we'll move on.
Well,
James, go ahead.
I'd like to add, the favorite thing for me, as I said before, I've studied a few languages. I really like foreign languages. And the thing about each language I find is, aside from having each of them their own really difficult thing to do, is the individual sounds. And in Yiddish in particular, each of the words, they have this past that adds to the acting, and that kind of informs the acting itself already, along with the sounds. In Judaism, I'm a goy, a shegitz, a Gentile. But the sounds, along with the history of the words, the Hebrew, the Yiddish, and the Slavic loan words, all added. And I feel like it definitely changed the atmosphere. And I would hear that from all the audience members when we were collecting for Broadway Cares and the Red Buckets. And you could just see that as they were leaving the theater, they didn't have to say anything. They were so affected. And some of them would say, wow, just wow, or thank you. And so many times outside of the theater, they felt like it really transported them outside of New York City. They didn't feel like they were in New York. And that's my favorite thing about the Yiddish, is that I think it really set the tone, the scene, to take them to this other world.
Great. Okay, so I'm gonna keep us moving. So from my perspective, there are 3 main themes in the story, and one of those is relationships. Of course, everybody in Anatevka has a relationship with Tevye, but there are many key relationships in this story that are on so many other levels. So, Adam, I'm going to turn to you for a second. So, as the beloved rabbi, as der Rav, you represent so much more than just a religious leader of this, little Jewish community down in Tefka. You're revered almost as God on earth, as many leaders of congregations and churches are deemed. So, can you talk about your character, his relationship with his people, and more importantly, about how your relationship, your connection to the character?
Well, this was my first rabbi, if I can. Yes, this was my first rabbi. I played many Jewish characters, never an actual rabbi. So that was very interesting when I realized that this was sort of the moral compass of the town, and the one that everyone looked to for answers in a world where the answers were becoming increasingly hard to come by, and the solutions weren't always there. So what I came to the realization of, in terms of how I wanted to play him, was that while there were rules to be followed, life didn't have to be so serious. At the very beginning, the rabbi's first blessing is a joke. Right. The one, may God bless and keep the Tsar, weit, weit von uns. And then, in the wedding, the rabbi is the one that tells everyone it's not expressly forbidden for a man to dance with a woman. Like, again, rules are there to be followed, but life is meant to be enjoyed. So then in Act 2, as things start to get worse and worse and worse, and then it's probably my favorite exit line that I've ever had, and when Mendel asks, wouldn't this be a good time for the Messiah to come? And the rabbi, what more can be said, except we'll have to wait for him someplace else. Right. So let's start packing, and it's, when the town, or when anyone looks to someone for leadership, it's their duty to lead from the head and the heart. Right. So that's where I sort of took my rabbi from.
Gotcha. Great. Thank you. So 2 characters in particular had truly tumultuous relationships, staying on that relationship thing, with Tevye. And those 2, for me at least, are the Constable and Laser Wolf. So Bruce, I'm going to turn to you first, if you don't mind. So Laser Wolf is a larger-than-life character, especially as it was originally portrayed in the classic Topol film, and he was just this bigger-than-life character. But Laser and Tevye have been friends for years, but you really can't tell based on their key interactions. So if you could talk a little about, Laser, and again, keeping in that thing with relationship, how you related to this character, and how you, felt you portraying him best.
Well, I'm not sure if it's true that Tevye and Laser were friends. It's clear that they travel in at least adjacent circles. They may pray together, and they may see each other at important holidays and so on. But clearly, Tevye doesn't really like Laser, because Laser is just a businessman and not really interested in scholarly things. So they may be colleagues. They're a little bit on the opposite sides of the spectrum. I mean, they're literally milk and meat, and the 2 don't really go together. But I think that the Laser that I came to be is a little bit different from traditional Laser Wolves that you might have seen, that certainly you saw in the movie, and others that have been played in other productions, because I have a different, carriage than some of those guys, and so I had to come up with a Laser that was, more suited. And to me, Laser was a bit of a sad guy, who had unfortunately lost his wife, who may not have been the most loving partner in the world to begin with. And now he's alone. And, he's really earnest about wanting to find love. And he's in contrast to past Fiddler on the Roofs, is a relatively decent guy. And it makes it more interesting, I think, in this production, because the fact that Seidl doesn't want to marry Laser isn't because he's a horrendous, grotesque, kind of awful man. It's because he's not her soulmate. He's not Mother. And so it makes it even more beautiful when Tevye decides to let Seidl marry Muddle and not Laser, because it really is about love, and it takes a lot more, even, because he can't convince himself, well, it would be a really terrible match, and I could imagine how awful that would be for my daughter. It's like, no, actually, Laser is a really nice guy, but my daughter is in love with Muddle, and therefore I'm going to give her way.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I may have misspoke about the friends thing. I will have to make a note of that for next time. Thank you. So Bobby, real quick, so the constable is kind of the proverbial bad guy in this show, right? The things he does, the things he says, his approach, and again, that tumultuous relationship with Tevye. The things he says are just so incredibly hurtful, but because of who he is, Tevye has to kind of walk a fine line and be able to deal with that. So talk for a few minutes, if you would, about, that character in the grand scheme of things, and again, connections.
Well, I had a conversation with Joel early on that made me decide that Tevye and my father, my character's father, who is not a character in the show, were friends. And maybe my father's dead, or maybe he's just not around, or whatever. But that Tevye and I had this sort of father-son-like relationship. And I had, every time it was hard, actually, to get into the mindset of somebody who sees Jews as less than. But I had somebody in mind for when I talked to Tevye, somebody in real life who is, let's say he supports someone I do not support. How about that? Okay. And so, but I think he's a good guy, despite that. So I sort of imagined myself talking to him, that guy. And that's who I made Tevye in my life, is this paternal figure to me, because that's who this guy is, a paternal figure to me who just is something that I cannot can't quite wrap my arms around.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. Interesting. Thank you. Moving on. So Kayleen, how are you? Oh, you're on mute. There we go.
I'm good. I got it.
Good. So, we chatted for a few minutes before we started this, and, I was very surprised to hear that you didn't speak Yiddish fluently growing up in Missouri. What a surprise to me.
Yeah, right. I know. Shocking.
I thought that was amazing. I would have thought that would have been the first language, but
I think.
But I actually grew up speaking Yiddish as a second language because it was the primary language of my grandparents, and when they didn't want me to know things, they spoke Yiddish, so I had to learn Yiddish so I could know what they were talking about. But we all talked, and it looks like the mass majority of the cast really were not Yiddish-speaking, actors beforehand. So talk to me a little bit about that process, what you needed to do, what kind of a challenge that was, because I would imagine that's probably one of the biggest challenges of this show. You have to learn to speak and sing, and not only that, but also understand so you could react to your characters, not just recite lines.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the first step was knowing what Yiddish was, because I had never even heard of it where I grew up. But yeah, so I actually, in college, I actually did 2 degrees. I did a BM in vocal performance and a BA in Spanish. And James was saying, there's a lot of crossover with some languages that help with Yiddish. Spanish wasn't really one of those. But between that, working on language in that capacity, and also with my vocal performance degree, singing in like Italian and German and French and all sorts of things, I got used to the idea of, you know, having to phonetically translate something and actual lyric translation, and being able to pronounce and emote something that was totally foreign to you. So that skill set was those muscles were still working. It was just applying it to a new language. And luckily, you know, I just enjoyed nerding out on that whole process. And I, you know, would get my script, and I like went through and like used the International Phonetic Alphabet and like IPA'd the whole score, you know, and lines and everything. And they gave us a word. For me, I mean, I don't know how other people did it, but for me, you know, I did all of that, and they gave us in the script, our script had the lines in Yiddish that we were saying, and then a translation of that line, and then the original book line from the actual book. But the translation line, you know, it wasn't word for word, because grammatically then that would make no sense. So sometimes if I couldn't figure out, you know, what one particular word was, which you need to know, you know, for emphasis and this and that, before we had our coaching. So I was like, what is this word? And so I'm trying to like look it up on the internet, but typing it in, you know, our alphabet doesn't really work. So you'd be like, maybe it means boy. And I type in boy, and I'm like, that looks like it was such an insane process. But really interesting and really fun. So yeah, it's definitely a bunch of extra steps from, you know, your normal English or native language show.
Right. And as I learned the hard way, Google Translate has no clue what Yiddish is. Not
at all.
Clue and a half. I looked at it, was like, oh my God. Oh, good. And the interesting thing is with the show, because I was, you know, listening again to the soundtrack album and such, you know, there's a bunch of different pronunciations in Yiddish. There's, you know, Litvak and the Galicianos and that such. And, you know, my family was from Galicia, so, you know, in Poland, in that area. So when, you know, one would say Good Shabbos versus Git Shabbos and things like that, you know, the subtleties. But try having a conversation with somebody from the other side. It's very interesting. But I have to tell you, very convincing, everybody. Great job in making people think you could actually speak the language. Nicely done. So let's jump right ahead. So tradition, right? The most prevalent theme in Fiddler starts with the opening number, runs like lifeblood through the entire production. So I'm curious in regards to tradition itself. You know, actors, theater companies during productions usually have their own traditions. They have their superstitions, you know, the things you do, you know, pre-curtain rituals, warm-ups, and, you know, some people, the way they put their clothes on, you know, they'll never change that, because if it worked really well and they had a great opening night, they'll stay that way forever. Just curious, on the lighter side, any traditions that this cast developed, you know, as a group, any, you know, rituals, any superstitions that you might want to share with our audience?
Well,
it's the back scene stuff people like to, you know, hear the gossip on.
Kirk and I were always the first to arrive at theater.
Yeah, that's very true. I have a problem. I'm chronically early. I'm working on it. You know, I showed up to my therapy appointment early for it, so I got thrown out. But yeah, no, James and I always showed up early, and it was just nice to get there and not have to worry about the transit, and just already be there and take my time and maybe read, have a cup of coffee. You know, it calmed me down before the show, so I wasn't running in and getting dressed immediately.
Nice. But Raquel did beat you tonight to the Zoom, so I just want to call that out. You know,
I did. We had some good traditions. There was Mark, his name is, and he's the master of everything at stage 42. And there was one I did something with him in this tradition in the opening scene. All the daughters in the background, and we go back and forth, and our heads go back and forth as well. And I was on the rightmost side of the stage, and he was on stage right, prepping a prop that needed to go off. And we would always make eye contact, and he would do something silly every time. Like he would hold the baby doll or something crazy. Well, one day he somehow found this like life-size mask of a Star Wars character, I think it's Darth Vader, and it caused a total uproar throughout the whole theater. The whole rest of Act 1, everyone was like, "Did you see Marcus?" I don't know how. There's that one time everyone managed to see him stage right during tradition, I guess because he had this huge costume piece on his head, and it caused like a huge uproar. There's like a couple other times when he did that. He had like a life-size cutout of some celebrity and stuff. So that one was always really fun to do backstage, was connect with him.
Very cool.
I had a great tradition with Drew Siegla, who played Perchik. And he did not have to be holding my hand at the start of tradition. You know, we're all lined up backstage, getting ready to go on. And I was at the end of the line, and he didn't have to be at the end of the line, but he would always be there with me holding my hand because he wanted to be a part of the line starting the show. And every week we would take turns coming up with a mantra for the week, and we would say it just before the show would start. We'd say it, and then we'd get ready and he'd march on with me, but then separate as soon as I was entering the stage. It was
nice.
That line, I feel like, had so many traditions in it, just that beginning line, because we stood there for so long, at places. And, Steven is being incredible doing his thing, but I guess, we're all having our moments when we're not watching that. And I was Nick, one of our amazing dancers, started that line, except for one day that put the fear of God in me that I had to start the line because we had a hole and I didn't know, and that was scary. That was awesome. I did great at it, I'm sure. But him and Kirk and I all had a thing where on certain musical cues, we grabbed hands and did a little shimmy right before we came on every show. And we would always tell the person, if I had to swing on for one of their daughters, our swing, it was always like, don't screw up the shimmy, because you're starting the show, and if you mess it up, it's game over. And I believe she did it with them, to my knowledge. So hopefully she did a good job.
Got it right every time. We couldn't go out if she didn't.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. For many of us in Act 2, the first time we would enter was in the middle of the act for the number The Rumor. So at the beginning of Act 2, pretty much every night it coincided with a live trivia game, HQ live trivia. And so Kirk and Bobby and I and several other people would play HQ trivia every night. And there would be nights where we're almost to the end of the game and you could stand to earn a little bit of money. And, they'd be finishing Do You Love Me? And it's like, wait, sing a little slower, sing, just trying to get that last question in. But that was always very, very fun.
Did you ever win?
Oh, many times.
Oh, nice.
Many
34 cents, 42 cents.
Oh, yeah. I think we won SpongeBob trivia. I think we won a Star Wars trivia. What didn't we win? Musical theater trivia. There was a trick question. We all lost. We were mad.
I will never forget what it was. Patty LaPone stole an audience member's phone, not during Jimmy, but during Shows for Days. I'll never forget it now.
Dollars in my HQ account that I don't know how to access.
Anybody else? Otherwise, we're going to move on. Jen, did you have something?
Oh, yeah, no, there were moments where a lot of us would get to our places early, and then, you look forward to seeing that person. So, I would get there early before Richman, and Steven and I would sit, and we'd always check in, how's the audience today? How's the crowd? And then we would always applaud Matchmaker every night. And then as Rachel would come off with her little basket, I'd keep cheering. I would cheer for her. I would cheer for Lauren Jean Thomas, who's our fiddler. She moved a little chair. So I would always applaud her. I mean, little things like that, And then it's just fun. Me and Jackie Hoffman, who played Yenta, at the end, she would get there early for her dream places. And then at the end of Miracle of Miracles, we would always tell a one-liner joke to each other. On the button, on the applause, and again, that was the other thing. It was where were you? We needed our joke. It's things you get used to, and she would always crack me up. I mean,
I just want one thing about Jackie, Steven was talking about finally getting to do an age-appropriate Tevye. Jackie, in her one-woman show, talked about how she got cast in Yiddish Fiddler and said, "Finally, a fiddler on the roof I'm not too Jewish for."
Nice, nice. So Jen, you actually mentioned the dream sequence. So Lydia, I know that you got a chance to play Grandma Seidl, one of those characters, single scene but so poignant, referenced throughout the show. Talk a little bit about that whole dream sequence and playing Grandma Seidl. You're on mute, by the way. Let me unmute you.
Okay.
There we go.
So one of the oddest things is, in musical theater or opera, the maestro is key. You have to watch the maestro for your entrance and cutoffs. And Grandma Seidl entered behind a curtain. I couldn't see any monitors. So I think my first few performances, there was a little improvised Yiddish, if you will. And there was also a fall that I was supposed to do, and I was really terrified of it for quite a while. I fell into the rabbi's arms at one point, and finally one night I got brave enough and I said, I'd like to try it. Adam was good enough to let me practice with him several times. And then, it was, well, why didn't I do this all the time? My other favorite moment was dancing with Zissel, the clarinetist, behind the screen. It was very surreal because you had to be this giant person suddenly and learn how to work that light and where to stand and not cut your head off, and then to react, but all people are seeing of you is a shadow. I felt quite like I was in a silent movie a lot of the times when I did that role. But I just want to say, I know this is harking back, but the audition process, I auditioned kind of on a whim, wasn't planning to go into the audition. And I must have been called back 6 or 7 times until someone left the cast and I was able to be the replacement. And Joel was the person who came up and said, take that schmata off, let me see what you really look like. And that was it. It was really a thrill. And the first time I watched the show from the front, I'll do it now. I burst into tears that I would be part of something like this. It was very special, all 3 months. I cherish every day of it.
Nice. Thank you. Good. So songs in a musical theater production are generally there for our members of our audience to understand. The way a musical is structured, the songs in the show are really there to advance the plot. They're there not just for the sake of, filling up 3 or 4 minutes, but they're there to tell more of the story and to help move the story along. So in Fiddler, of course, is no exception. Every song has a place, every song has a purpose, meaning a laugh or a tear, sometimes both at the same time, So one of the most iconic, of course, is Tevye As If I Were a Rich Man, right? So Steven, are we good for this? Are we going to be able to do this?
I think so.
Beautiful. So as a little surprise for our audience, because people have been texting me and say, are they only talking or are we going to hear some singing from these people? So with that, Steven has graciously agreed to perform that number for us. So I'm going to give you the spotlight, sir.
All right.
It is all yours.
Let me just say, I see myself. No, it's okay. Let me just say that if there's technical difficulties or audio balance, that's just the life of Zoom. I very graciously have the artistic director of the National Yiddish Theater Folksbeine, Zalman Mlotek, recorded this track for me. So this is a little bit of If I Were a Rich Man, okay, from the Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof, if you will indulge me. Rabbeinu Shalom, hast doch beschaffen a Welt mit armen Leid. Und weiß ich doch, es ist gar nicht kein Schande zu sein, ein armer Mann, aber a größer Cover, das euch nicht. Was wollt gewinnen so schlecht, wenn ich wollt ja gehabt, a kleiner Oizer. Wenn ich bin a Rothschild, bumm. Ganze Tag wollte ich sich mit die Bumm. wenn ich bin ein reicher Mann. Hand in kaltem Wasser, nicht reingetan wie die Boom. Ich wollte gehabt der Deidel, Beitel Geld und gewinner Seidel, Edelmann. Und ich wollte mir aufgebaut ein Haus wie ein Palatzdachke inmitten von der Stadt. Ein Schein am Dach und ein Käumen, was bloß der Reich. Ein lange Treppe von Holz wird laufen rauf, ein zweiter noch länger läuft rauf. Ein dritter läuft, ich weiß noch nicht wie hoch. Und es wird meine Häuf sein voll mit Katschkes und Gänse, die Sonne macht platzen sollen sein. Von dem Krähen wären die euren Miet. Und jeder das heißt jeden, ich hab der letzte Nein. Und es heißt noch, als da wohnt ein reicher Jid. Wenn ich bin ein Rothschild, ganze Tag wollte ich sich mit die Bumm, wenn ich bin ein reicher Mann, Hand in kaltem Wasser, nicht reingetan wie die Bumm. Ich wollte gehabt, a Deidel, Beitel Geld, Eidel, Deidel, Deidel, Art ist mein Weib, mein Gold, sehr schön neuse Gewirrte, geht mit der Keule, mit der Beuch. Macht der Zimmers, starr in der Prostentog. Sie wischt dem Schweiß und sie bloßig, geh schon wie ein Paar, oi, es geht von ihrer Räuch. Hatten alle Diensten bald der Jog. Und jeder Gewirr in Stadt wird kommen zu und fragen mir. Punkt wie bei Schleume Hamelech, geht ein Eizer mir ich bett, kratzt die Boot, Reptevje, sagt der Wort, Reptevje. Auf die Scheile seucht auf die Peis dreht, bye, 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 bye. Sis war sie kein Schum nach Gemünet, sie mein Enter hat der Tam. Wer ist reich, versteh ich a Sonne seuch. Wenn ich bin reich, hab ich sich Zeit und ich geh 3 Mal a Tag in Schule rein. Und ich kauf mir Stadt bei der Misrechwand. Und ich lern Schaß und Poskin mit die fromme Jiden. Gott en Juven wird das sein. Efter nur in unser heiligt Land. Wenn ich bin ein Rothschild, ja, wie Bumm. Ganze Tag wollte ich sich wie die Bumm. Wenn ich bin ein reicher Mann, Hand in kaltem Wasser, nicht reingetan wie die Bumm. Gott, was warft von Himmel und der Mann? Beschließt, ich bleibe ein Ohrmann. Was wird schon gestört bei dir dem Plan? Wenn ich bin ein reicher Mann. Thank you.
The crowd goes wild. Thank you. That was wonderful.
My pleasure. 6 months later, I still have some Yiddish in me.
You still got it, Steven.
We're all still crying.
That was great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure. Oh.
Thanks. So I'm going to stay on the topic of music for just a second. So Jen, I'm going to turn to you if you don't mind. So, you know, aside from Rich Man, which of course has a real place in my heart, you know, one of my favorite songs, and I was going to play the video that you sent me, but we're running out of time. So I'm going to actually post the link to the duet that you sent me on YouTube of you and Steven doing "Do You Love Me," which is just one of those numbers that, you know, I don't know anybody that just doesn't sit there and it just hits home and you cry and you know, it's just a very special number. And you know, I would have loved to play it, but like I said, I'll link it for the page. But I want to turn to you for a second, and I want to talk about, you know, clearly one of my favorite scenes that involves Golda, which is the scene where Golda has to search out Tevye to let her know about Chava. Sorry, I'm getting all verklempt just thinking about it. It's incredibly poignant. It is powerful. You know, Golda goes through this transformation throughout the rest of the show. She's very easygoing, but she's very stern. But this just tears her to pieces, and it tears Tevye even worse. So, could you talk about that scene a little bit? How do you prepare, you know, to do a scene like that that just rips, you know, at the soul?
You know, I'm gonna start crying too.
Sorry.
No, for her, for Golda, right? She never stops, right? If she drops the ball, nothing happens, right? No one gets fed. Shabbos isn't ready. And she runs the show, right? And part of "Do You Love Me?" What's so beautiful about that scene is, and in our production, it was so simple, just two benches, right? And he's just asking her a question, right? And she wants to keep moving. She wants to deflect, and then but he keeps asking, and it's a moment for her to really just rest and reflect and really think. And that's the first time you really see her take that moment. And then, you know, it's such a beautiful ending of the song, and you know, she, in our production, you know, she rests her head on his shoulder at the end, and it's like, she can take a moment, you know. So then, you know, then when the Chava scene comes, it's another moment where she's never known not what to do, right? And she is coming to him. She's heard this devastating news, and it's like she ran a marathon, right? She's running to find Tevye, to tell him this news, and then also, what do we do, you know? But Chava, like, she's, you know, Golda's many things. She's a woman of faith, of tradition, family, but she's a mom, you know. And I think it's this moment that their faith and their parental failings are both being tested here. And so she's devastated. I mean, it's her daughter, you know, and this means that she is dead to them, you know. So it's everything. It's her whole world, right, of these kids. So that was one scene, you know, Steven and I and Joel worked on, and it just grew and grew as we went on in the year and a half. And there was one day in rehearsal, and Joel just said, "I want you to sprint in there and just collapse onto Tevye," right? And I'm a runner too, right? I've run some marathons in my life, and so I was like, all right, I can do that, you know. But I had to trust my partner. I had to trust Steven, and I had all the trust in the world in him. And you know, he would always be there to catch me. Actually, one night, I think the first night we really did that during previews, I slipped. This is crazy because I was also running in heels. Talk about, you know, sprinting in heels. But I slipped at the very end because I just went for it, right? You got to just go for it. And he caught me. I was like, I don't know if you remember that, but I was like, you know, I was falling back. Anyway, it was like, talk about, you know, putting your trust in your scene partner. And we just always had that trust in each other and faith. It was a beautiful scene.
Well, the chemistry certainly works. I mean, there's no question about that. So that's great. Thank you. So staying on the theme of family, which for me is the third of the three themes that I want to bring up tonight. So perhaps the most important, as you just mentioned, you know, for Tevye and Golda is their family, their daughters, right? It's you know, it's their legacy, it's their life, and their devotion to that. So Jennifer, you played Seidl. Where are you, Jennifer? Oh, Rachel, I'm sorry. Are you there?
Yeah, me. Sorry. Hi.
I'm sorry. So Rachel, you played Seidl,
Yeah.
Tevye's eldest daughter, right? Promised herself to muddle in almost for the audience kind of a show of defiance, right? It's very out of character for that time and for her. And Kirk, I know you had your career as Avram, but I know that from following you and from conversation we had that you actually had the opportunity to actually go on as Muddle. So I'm going to ask you to put your Muddle hat on for a second, and the two of you to kind of talk about that, because that whole scene that leads into Miracles, and your approach to Tevye and Tevye's whole diatribe and where he goes off in the freeze moments and everything. Talk about that relationship and how that kind of played in, very prevalent, because that set the stage for Huddle, and then unfortunately for what Chava did and the progression of things. But talk a little bit about that for us, if you would.
Yeah, I always say that Seidl is a pioneer woman, because she's the first to break the tradition, to break the mold. And that scene every night was such a gift to play with Steven and with whomever I had on as Muttle. And Kirk was amazing as Muttle from day one, just unbelievably present and so much fun to play with. And yeah, I mean, it's that whole scene, she's pleading with pleading with my father, and I've made my decision, and it's scary, and I'm looking for strength and comfort from Mottel, and he comes in there, and Kirk, you could speak to when you come into the scene, but I mean, it's just it was so amazing to watch that whole thing play out between Muttle and Tevye, and him trying to find the strength and trying to fight for me, and just that whole scene. It just every night it was the best, and having Kirk on was a dream. Kirk, you're amazing.
Oh, Rachel, thank you so much. I guess from Mottle's point of view, Mottle is just somebody who, he's a poor tailor. He's never been thought of as much by anybody, so he turned that into his own internal view of himself, that he doesn't think too much of himself. So he kind of thinks, well, why would Tevye say yes to me? Because I'm just a poor tailor, and Seidl is Seidl. She could have anybody. She's just a dream. And Rachel was a dream to work with as well. And also shout out Kayleen, who I got to rehearse with at understudy rehearsal, who made it just that much more easier for me to be prepared to go on for Mottle when I had the privilege to do so. But to Mottle, Tevye just represents that entire overbearing, no, you can't, that has been in his entire life. Just this wall that Mottle has not been able to get past. And personally, when I went on and I played with Steven and Rachel in that scene, when I was talking to Tevye, I would always be shaky and a little unsure, just pushing forward a little bit more. But whenever I looked at Rachel, or I made physical contact with Rachel, that's when my speech would steady. That's when I would find my strength, because Mottle's strength comes directly from his relationship with Seidl, who is the one person who sees him as everything he can be.
Right.
So in that final moment where he finally says, it's true, I'm just a poor tailor, but even I'm entitled to some happiness, echoing what Seidl said in an earlier scene, he grabs her hand and holds on and is like, this is it, here we go. It's now or never. So I'm sticking with you, and this is the moment of my life here. And it's either gonna work or it's not, but it better work, So that's from Mottle's point of view. I think that's how the scene went.
I got you. So real quick, both Rachel and Kirk. So, was there something from your own personal experience, your own personal past, that you used to really connect to the character, to become that character? A lot of what I teach my students is, to try to find a way to tell their story through somebody else's words and lyrics. So I'm just curious, was there something, Kirk, that you pulled from in order to understand how to really be, Muddle? And Rachel, same question for you for Seidl.
Yeah, I have my own personal connection, especially to the whole Miracles, just that whole thing that I will not share with you, because that's no fun. But I do, and it was very, very easy to go there every night because of the actors stepping into that role.
Yeah, I think for me, it's just, this acting profession brings with it a lot of self-doubt. I think all of us have gone through that kind of a period of, am I good enough to do this? Should I even be here? But it's the love of what you do that pushes you forward. And I found that connection with Muttle, because with Muttle, it's the love of Seidl that keeps pushing him forward to do great things and to be everything that she thinks he can be. So I just drew upon my periods of self-doubt as an actor, and then I still persevered and I pushed through, and I got to something like this with these amazing people. So that's what I use.
Thank you. And Bruce, I know that you have to book. Thank you so much for being here. I know ahead of time you've stuck around actually longer than you were going to, but thank you so much for being here.
I apologize. It was great to see you guys. I hope to talk to you all soon. Thanks, Marty. It was a great talk, and enjoy the rest of it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Okay, so I'm going to keep trudging along. We're running a little behind schedule. I don't have a schedule, but I promised you a schedule. So Raquel, I'm going to turn to you real quick. So I know, in reading everybody's bios and preparing for tonight, I know that you graduated from Manhattan School of Music, Masters in Music, right? And actually, so I know you're trained opera singer, and I got to listen to some of those recordings that you had on YouTube and such. So, did you get your formal training at Manhattan School, or have you always sung opera?
Oh my gosh, so I've been like obsessed with the opera since I was a kid, like 8 years old. Always wanting to do it, always. So I found a voice teacher. Her name's Baydeen Magaziner, and she is the most wonderful voice teacher in the world. And she's the one who kind of mentored me my whole life into finding my voice, literally. And she's the one who really helped me get into graduate school, where I actually randomly met Sammy, who was pursuing her bachelor degree, who's going into her senior year now, studying theater. So yeah, I got a really wonderful education in Manhattan School of Music.
So when things return to some level of normalcy, are we sticking with the Fiddler type of theater, or are you gonna, start pursuing that career as a, opera singer, a diva somewhere, touring doing the Met or something? We can give away tickets on the site, to see your next show at the Met.
Marty, it's so funny you ask, because actually I've been looking at graduate degrees again for speech pathology, which you just told me earlier your daughter is a speech pathologist, which is inspiring. So not that I want to abandon my career, which I absolutely don't. I love singing and I love performing, and I will do it in any capacity. I think that the Yiddish theater was a perfect meld between the two, between the operatic style of performing and the music theater style. I got to be able to act and do all of these wonderful off-Broadway shows with the Folksbeine, which is where Fiddler got its start, here in America at least. Right. And I got to incorporate that language work and a lot of the classical styles that I had learned growing up in my Yiddish singing. And now I think that we have this opportunity to kind of explore other avenues. I think speech pathology is a really fun way and helpful way. I also am a teacher, and so I think it's going to be really important to myself as a singer, but also in a pedagogical sense, to be able to teach my students even more about how the voice works. So I think it's really important to any student who's listening right now to explore all those different kinds of avenues, when we all think that this is going to be the end all be all, and for a lot of us it is, but then other people are going to get involved in theater and see that they love stage management side of it. They love props. They might love costumes. A lot of our costume people on our show were performers as well, and so there are so many different avenues you could take. So I'm actually, believe it or not, it's not even going to be classical. It's not even going to be classic music theater style. It might be speech pathology. So who knows?
Well, I think my daughter Allie's probably watching this. So Allie, note to self: I need to connect you with Raquel so you guys can talk.
Please do. That'd be wonderful.
Absolutely. So we've talked about dialogue. We've talked about music, dance. James, where are you? There you are. Our trained ballet dancer. Take that mute off there. There we go. So again, done my homework. Got a chance to read the bios and hit all your Facebook pages and your websites and such. So not much ballet in this production of Fiddler. However, the dreaded bottle dance.
Yes.
Got to ask you about it, right? It's the bane of the existence of every cast I've ever music directed the show with. It is one of the things that everybody looks forward to, but nobody wants to do with the fear of being ostracized, of dropping that bottle. So, talk to us about it.
Of course.
About how you do that.
Of course, you brought me here to talk about the bottle dance. I'll get to the rest of the dance later, but I coined a term in we did a early morning at New York One Spectrum live bottle dance, and I ended up coining a term, the bottle smells fear, because that was my process of doing the bottle dance. We only had a bottle. It was a real champagne bottle, glass, and a hat. No magnets, no Velcro. That's it. We had to stick it into the hat,
right,
and it balanced. And I discovered in order to keep it on your head, you really just have to let go of tension. I feel like if you're nervous, then the tension will build, and then you'll just end up dropping the bottle, which I only did once in the entire year and a half. And I blame it on conditioner I had used that day. Because the hat slipped. It slips. You pay attention to those fine things, like, oh my God, my hat is down just a little farther than usual. And then you're like, please, you're praying, just stay on my head, just stay on my head. But to be doing this, it was pretty true to the Jerome Robbins choreography and staging. So it was really great to revive that on a New York stage, which hadn't been done in the past Broadway revival. We had to make some modifications, obviously, because the stage we were dancing on was quite small originally. But yeah, to learn that iconic choreography in both L'Chaim and the bottle dance. And right now, I just have to mention, everyone always asks about the bottle dance. I get it. It's
I'm sorry.
No, I get it. It's cool. It's iconic. But does anyone see what happens after the bottle dance? For me, that's literally the hardest part. We do this, we call it whips and hooks, and we just thrash backbends repeatedly.
Right.
Yeah. And when the choreographer, Stash Kimiet, showed that to us, I was like, no, that's not in this show. This is the bottle dance. But sure enough, that's what happens afterwards. I'm like, how am I going to get through these excruciating backbends 8 times a week?
Right.
And I thought I just have to relax and I have to breathe. And I lasted the entire year and a half, thank God, with no injuries. But also, yeah, L'Chaim was also one of my favorites because I was a Russian in L'Chaim.
Right.
And doing it also iconic folk dance choreography. And coming from a background where I was really striving to be in a ballet company, I really enjoyed the classical aspect, because folk dance, it comes from what people do in their villages and shtetls, but in ballet world, it's kind of codified and polished up.
Okay.
But still, I really love that kind of standoff between the Jews and the Russians doing our own like national dances at each other. And of course, L'Chaim is just an epic number and ends with a big button.
Oh, it's great. It's great. Okay, so now I have 2 notes. I got to remember that Laser Wolf wasn't really friends with Tevye, and not to ask you about the bottle dance. I'm good.
No.
I'm good. I'm good. I got this down pat. We'll do this again next week. But the reason why I asked that, right, is because, and just so you know, there's actually a dance company out of Princeton, New Jersey, that works a lot with klezmer bands and such, and they go to weddings and they get paid large sums of cash to do the bottle dance.
Yeah, I actually trained to be one of those wedding dancers back in Chicago. There was also a group doing that. I never actually performed it, and they had bad hats, bad bottles. I never actually accomplished it. So
the reason why I asked about the bottle dance is just for that, right? So in watching that video that you had online, the cast I've worked with have really cheated, right? They had the hat with a hole in the middle.
Yeah.
The bottle sits all the way deep in there, and they're doing all this fancy stuff, and everyone's going, wow, yeah. And I'm sitting there saying, you don't get it.
Yeah.
But that's why I asked you, because, I have problems walking a straight line, let alone carrying a bottle in my hat. So, that's the reason why. So when I saw that was really a critical dance component for you and you as the dancer, and we have a lot of dancers on our group, really want to address that, because it is so much more. But dance is just as integral to this whole thing and to the whole Yiddish culture and to, to everything. It's part of, any simcha. There's music and dancing. You got to have lots of food to feed people so they'll stay, but there's music and dancing, right?
Yeah.
So, thank you. Thank you. Samantha, I didn't want you to think I was forgetting about you. So Samantha, if I am correct, and please, I don't want to be wrong on number 3. You are the youngest person in the cast?
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank God. All right, this one I can check off. I got that right. Okay, so we have a lot of younger people in our Facebook group. A lot of them with their eyes, and hearts set on their shot at Broadway. And you've done now Off-Broadway. You've done TV. Voicing a part of Trinket the Unicorn on Nickelodeon, right? So you've been doing all of that. How long have you actually been doing this? I mean, when was your first stage production? How long have you been doing the voiceover? Because a lot of our members are looking at what is their options, especially the younger ones. They're planning on college and where do they go? And you're at, as Raquel said, Whistle, that you guys met up actually at Manhattan. So just curious.
Yeah, I started doing the voiceover my senior year of high school, and I'm just finished my junior year of college now, and I took
Mazel tov.
Thanks. And I took a year off in between college actually to do Fiddler when we moved uptown to stage 42. But I've been doing theater, since I was really little and stuff. And then what was really cool is getting to come back to school after Fiddler 2 and get to learn so much and get to take my experiences from the show and my experiences from school and kind of just keep going with all of that. And that's been really cool, especially because so many people in the cast have been such great teachers and mentors to me that I feel like I got so much inspiration from them, and then to take that back to school and keep learning was really great.
So I've got to ask you, since you are still in school, and it's college, but still in school, being in Fiddler and, being on TV and all this other such, has that had an effect, on your personal relationships with your classmates? I mean, is everybody like, ooh, it's Samantha, she's in a Broadway show, or, any of that type of thing? Was that ever an issue, or was that really a positive thing for you?
I'd say it's not really an issue or anything, because everybody's, I admire so many of my classmates because I get to see them perform in class, and I watch them and I'm just amazed by what they can do. And so when it comes down to what people have done, it's not that much important. It was a little weird for me coming back to school having done that, because then it's like, oh, what are you doing back here? You were already on Off-Broadway and stuff like that.
Right.
But after you get past that, it's really just I would love to be in a class and learn from people of all ages and all experiences, because everyone has so much to share.
Yeah, great. That's beautiful to hear. The story goes that Frank Sinatra, even up to his later years, was still taking voice lessons, because he always felt you could always keep your craft going. You could always learn a few more things. This is my instrument. So yeah, all good stuff. I was just curious that. So thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. Okay, so I'm gonna pounce at you guys with some questions that our members had submitted that they wanted to hear. And clearly one of my favorite questions, so every show, at least every show that I've been involved with, has had their oops moment, right? Something goes wrong, funny or otherwise, right? Missed cues, a prop drops, somebody forgets to walk onto a thing, and all that such. So in regards to Fiddler, and if you'd like, you can open it up outside of Fiddler, but since we're doing a discussion about Fiddler, any of those oops moment in the show that you can share with us? Again, the people love to hear the backstage things that we don't get to see as audience. So anything.
Well, who's going to talk about the kabuki?
Oh!
Go for it, Kayleen.
I mean, we had in the dream scene, we had the kabuki, the screen, that Lydia was talking about, the Grandma Seidl's behind, and it's very important to the entirety of that whole scene. And, it's live theater, and there were a few different times, that when it drops, it got stuck. And so it didn't drop all the way. So then you've got this curtain just hanging, and you know, it's, you know, live theater, we had to do a hold. And the first time it happened, everyone's like, what do we do? You know, like, because there's some actors that are on stage, and it actually happened to me when I was in one of my understudy tracks, and Chava in that scene, or Huddle, one of them is on stage when it happened. And or both of them, yeah, they're on stage when it happens, and so the actors like had to leave stage. But the first time it happened, it's like, we're gonna back up, I guess we're done, I don't know. So people came off stage, and obviously once it happened once, you know, you make more of a plan, and there's a contingency, and you deal with it, and it happens. But you know, it's live theater, and our stagehand had to come down and use a hook and figure out how to bring it down. It was a whole ordeal, and I don't think any of us will ever forget it. But you know, the audience is right there with you, and sometimes it's the most fun to be at those shows, because you see that, you know, that's what the live theater thing is. You never know what's going to happen, and sometimes it's totally unexpected, but you go with it, and everyone's just safe, and then you got a good story to tell.
Lydia, you had something?
Well, on that same track, when we were still doing it down at the museum, I was about to go on, waiting for my cue from the assistant stage manager. And just as I was about to go, she said, the curtain's not in and it's not coming in. So now for the first time, I could see Zalman on the monitor. I could see everybody else. But when it came to being the giant grandma and the little grandma, I'm sure the audience was a little bit confused about some of my moves there. So,
yeah,
and there was a time also, I think, that we had to stop the show, that suddenly something happened with the sound. We continued for a few seconds, and then suddenly the voice of God, which was our wonderful stage manager, Kat, said, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, first she said, cast, freeze. And then she said, cast, please exit the stage. And then she announced to the audience they were taking a break until the sound was fixed. Those are probably the two most memorable oopses when I was in the show.
Raquel.
Yeah, I was gonna say there was one time when we were downtown still, and there was some sort of like fire alarm going off, or some sort of security alarm going off, and we're all on stage, we're holding hands, and we're powering through. I mean, totally, we all can hear it. It's ringing in our ears. There's someone over the loudspeaker going, everybody exit the building. And we're all going, tradition, tradition. I mean, we're all looking at each other like, what do we do? Finally, we hear the voice of God come over, and it's Kat, our stage manager, saying, okay, yeah, the cast needs to stop what you're doing. And you can hear the moans from the audience going, come on. And we had to take a second, take a beat. And, you know, we ended up coming back on stage. But it's so funny when those things happen. There was one other time, well, it actually was for a few days, when our Fruma Sarah was actually, I'm allowed to say this now, I think, with two people stacked one on top of the other. A man carrying a woman who was doing the movie.
She wasn't that tall? That's amazing. Oh
no, believe it or not.
Go figure. Now we know the story, how it happened. Unbelievable.
So there was at one point where we actually didn't have the original or an understudy who was able to do this, because they had either been injured or was out, whatever, what have you. And so we had to figure out how to do this. And she is so uber talented, this woman who did the role, that she figured out how to do pretty much the whole role by herself on her own 2 feet. And that itself was like, it was crazy to watch, because we're all so used to seeing this huge monster, and now she's like a teeny gremlin on stage. And it was just so like magical seeing her pull that off on her own. But that was a total moment where we were like, what the heck? What are we gonna do? What's gonna happen? But it just goes to show you the show must go on somehow, and it did.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, Adam, go please.
Just quickly, because you know, Raquel mentioned there were days, so every role had at least one, in most cases 2 understudies. But even with that, there were days where maybe there was an illness going around, there were a couple of people who'd gotten injuries, what have you. There were at least 2 that I can remember days where there was not enough coverage to cover every single role in its entirety.
Oh my God.
And so it fell to, I know Kirk, you were a big part of it. I was part of it. Ron Tal, who was one of our main swings, our male swings was part of it, had to redistribute lines from various scenes. There was one day where I had to do the Avram verse of the rumor, but as the rabbi. It was an ever-changing game of chess.
Right. There was one day where there was no Avram.
Yes.
Avram just wasn't there.
Got a better offer from another shtetl.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it was because I that same day that Adam was describing, I had to go on for Laser Wolf in a pinch because I think Bruce had a death in the family that week. But I had to go on for Laser in a pinch, and both Adam and my covers, who we understudied Laser, both of our covers were occupied because we had a couple people on vacation, I think. So Adam had to split my normal Avram track because there was no one else to cover it. He split it with the dance captain, who had never understudied my part before, but had to jump in at the last minute. And also, I had to do some of my Avram scenes as Laser Wolf. But I mean, when you have a supportive cast like this one and a great stage management team, and I have to give stage management a lot of credit, you can really pull something like that off in a pinch.
Very cool. Yeah, my favorite moment to share with you is we saw Rent on Broadway, and the show opens up. You know, great show. The show opens up, and the character, it's not Roger, it's whatever. Mark, thank you. Starts singing the Rent song, right? And he's singing and he's going through, and all of a sudden he stops and looks into the pit and says, "Hang on, wait a second." Looks at the guy in the front row and says, "Thank you. I actually sang the second verse instead of the first verse. Could we reset and do this again?" Literally stopped the show, had everybody reset. They moved all the props back again, and he restarted the entire show. We sat there going, and it just restarted the whole thing from scratch. It was interesting to say the least, but as they say, the proverbial stuff happens, right? So.
And if we had any mistakes with our Yiddish, nobody knew.
Nobody knew.
Because anybody that would have known was dead. So how would they know? Good. So that question I'm not going to go to. That question I'm not going to bother with. One more question, and then I'm going to hit our last piece, and then we're going to let everybody go. Again, my apologies for keeping you late, but I just want to get all through this stuff. So I actually was going to ask Bruce because Bruce has had a really interesting career between TV and film, and he's been in a number of my favorite shows, and I know he actually started out life in the financial arena as opposed to being an actor. So I'm just curious, with this cast. Did you have a different career path in mind? Were you're going to be a doctor, or were you going to be, whatever, a lawyer, or were you going to be, whatever, and then, acting, just happened and you decided this is your pursuit of happiness? James?
I kind of fall into that category. I was a trumpet player. I was a huge band geek all of high school, middle school, and I originally enrolled in college to study music education. And that's when I picked up dancing. I took up a dance minor, and one thing led to another. The teacher was like, "Wow, you have great facility for this." And I didn't know what he was talking about. I had never seen a ballet before, a dance performance. And I took a giant leap. I didn't know what a career looked like after college. And I finished out my first freshman year as a music education major. And in 3 years, I did a crash course in dance and ended up getting my first job as a trainee at Milwaukee Ballet. Amazing. And one thing led to another, and then I was at Yiddish Fiddler.
Nice. Bobby?
I was going to be a lawyer, which is a profession that runs in my family. I went to college. I started out majoring in government, and on a whim, I spent a summer at NYU's Cap 21 musical theater program, where people in the business, for the first time, it was the first time people in the business told me I was good. And I thought, well, oh, really? Because I love this and I would love to keep doing it and get paid for it. So that's how I got in.
Nice. Anyone else? Everybody else was just born out. Oh, Steven.
Well, I want to say I didn't have a previous career. There was a children's theater in my town of Lubbock, Texas, and I started doing plays when I was 10 years old. And I'm fond to say that the process that I did when I was 10, I'm still doing now, which is just pretending to be other things, pretending to be other people, and play acting my way through life. But so I at 10 years old knew I wanted to be in the theater. I wanted to be an actor, and it was around that time that Fiddler on the Roof came out, the movie, and it's like, stubby Jewish boys have a chance in this profession. So I have a chance, and so I had a dream and I pursued it. And thankfully, my parents were supportive of it. I got enough support along the way that I never felt like this was a mistake, and I just continued to this very day. So that, and I never had anything else I wanted to do.
Nice. And you're lucky. I was going to ask you the question that you already answered me, which was, were your parents supportive of this, right? Because that's critical. My parents told me, you're going to go study music. We're not paying, figure it out. So I had to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, luckily I was the youngest of four. So I think, I think my older brother had a harder time wanted to become a writer. And that was more challenging, I think, for the elder son to want to do a wasteful career. The baby can,
And Kirk, you started the same way, right? You started doing, actually you toured with doing children's theater and over at George Street and that such, right? And moved on to this and studied over at Montclair and all such.
Yeah, my very first experience, I started in educational theater from when I was 6 years old. A man named Michael Taubenslag brought his Theater Week program to my school, and I went to his theater camp for summers and summers with your daughters, who I befriended. Your daughters are great.
Thank you.
I got into professionally. I started out with children's theater, which I thought was very apropos. Started out with George Street, then I toured nationally with Arts Power, and then I got involved with Folksbeine, and the rest is history.
Nice. Good. So that's really the crux of what I want to talk about today. But I do want to hit really quickly on the masterclass piece, and I promise this will be it. And we'll move on. But a big portion of what a masterclass is, as I said, it's to educate as well as to entertain. And you folks have certainly done both those for our audience, so we thank you. But for those people who are thespians out there, the people who, they act in a community theater production, or they're in their school productions, or, they're choosing that college career on how to get to where you folks already are. I'm going to touch on three quick things, and we're going to kind of rapid fire this. So, if you all want to take off your mutes now and such, just jump in there. So I want to start with the very beginning of the process, which is the whole auditioning process. So tips and tricks for our thespians in our audience. Best way to prepare, favorite songs to sing, do's or don'ts when you go into that audition. Anybody?
If you don't show up, you don't get the job.
Nice.
Show up.
There we go.
Be prepared.
Be over prepared.
Love what you're performing, or it won't matter.
Yes, and yes, you can. Like, you can do it. Like, with this Yiddish experience, learning Yiddish for the audition in a few days, and thinking like, I'm not going to be able to do this. So many people thought I can't do the Yiddish. It's too hard. But look at the 20-something cast members who didn't speak Yiddish, who got, were taught by these amazing coaches at the Folksbeine, and we did it in a few weeks. So
take risks.
Yeah.
Be a good person.
Yes.
Yeah.
I once had someone tell me, which I thought was so important, was go make your goal be to book the room, not to book the job. So if you can make the people in the room love the story you're telling and be there with you in your intentions, then you've done what your job was.
And when you leave that room, move on to the next one. Right. Don't fixate. Don't overanalyze in your head. Keep a journal, but let it move on to the next one. If you hear about it, great. If not, it wasn't yours to get.
Right. Yeah, good point. I tell my students all the time, you do your thing, you take your best shot, you smile, you say thank you, and you walk out. And that's it, and you move on. You get a call, beautiful. If not, there's something else around the corner.
That it's not a rejection, not to get the role necessarily. It's not rejecting who you are. Right. It's just not necessarily what they are looking for, so you can't let not getting the role beat you up.
Favorite audition songs? Anybody? Do you have a go-to song that this is the one you do?
I can't tell you that.
Yeah, I was going to say some of these are sacrosanct. Like
mine aren't. I only have two.
Wow.
On the street where you live, and all I need is a girl.
Thank you. Okay, now I have to remember not to meet Rachel in the dark alley. She'll kill me. Wow. Wow. Okay. Note to self.
Yeah, right.
That's the second time you said that to me tonight. You said we can't tell you the backstage stories on this.
Rachel's tough, in case you haven't noticed.
Rachel, what?
He's tough.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. We kid because I can. So
because I mean, the one thing you don't want to do is necessarily go in and sing a song that everyone else does. So if you have one that you like that works for you,
right? No.
Although to be fair, I booked a lot of my first jobs off Vanilla Ice Cream, which I was told is the most overdone song in the world. So if you feel like you can do it the best you can do it, and you love it, just do it. And who cares?
Perfect. Okay, moving on. Number 2. So singing, right? Big part of musical theater. Obviously would not be musical theater if it wasn't singing. Tips for, performance techniques, warm-ups, vocal health, those types of things that people can take with them, when they're, preparing to pursue this career.
Water.
Hydrate.
Water.
If you're gonna add honey, don't choke.
And
I had a perfect record of shows. I hadn't missed a single show until my voice wasn't feeling that well, and I made the mistake of putting honey in my water and forgetting how to swallow properly. My voice, and there went my perfect streak.
Pineapple juice and rest.
yes.
Really? Pineapple juice?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's very hydrating for the cords, and has natural anti-inflammatories in it.
Bromelain. Yes.
Bromelain. Yes, I taught a couple people.
Learned that one from you. Learned that from you.
And take
Bromelain is actually the active ingredient in pineapple, correct?
Yes, and you can get capsules of it to take that.
Right. It's supposed to help with your breathing and the whole respiratory system, I think.
Yeah, I think listening to your body is the most important thing for a singer, for a performer. Knowing when you need to rest and when to push through and just really listening to yourself to make sure that you're letting your health be the number one priority.
Yeah, and being diligent with your warm-ups, because it's easy, especially if you get used to a role and you feel like it's in my back pocket, it's easy to just pull out, but it's so important.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Last but not least, performing. So we talked about the audition process. You get the part, you got to learn the songs, the things you need to do to keep yourself healthy and do those eight shows a week. Performing. So when you're on stage, the things that you folks do, and Rachel, you can yell at me now if you'd like, if I'm going to ask something here, but the things that you do, and this is really critical for the actors out there, right? The things that you do, to really prepare yourself to do the best, most natural way to connect to that part. And in particular, we talked about this in the preheat for this, how do you stay in character when something goes wrong? Like, what you said here, the curtain doesn't go down or a prop goes bad or, Kurt, all of a sudden, you can't sing because, you can't do, Talk about performing that tip for those actors out there. The one thing they should always keep in mind when they've got to perform.
I feel like with especially when things are going wrong and stuff, it's amazing what when your actor's instincts kick in. It's like you got reflex like this, like someone's prop drops and they're about to do the bottle dance, and whoop, someone just sweeps in and grabs it like before, without skipping a beat. And just keep trusting that, you're doing this for a reason, right? You have that innate ability. And, I think just keep trusting yourself and trust that you're going to stay in character, even when something goes wrong, because you're prepared and you've been rehearsing, you've been doing the role for a while and you've got it.
And if you're lucky, like we were, we had a group of actors that really supported one another. So if you fudged a line or went up on a line, or if anything happened, you could just kind of trust that you could lock in with the other person and get there and move through it together. And
My favorite memory about how supportive this cast is every time somebody went on for a role for the first time, like the first time Kirk went on for Muddle, when he sang Miracle of Miracles, the entire cast
gathered in the two wings to watch him. That's one of the things I miss the most about this cast.
Yeah.
I think, and I think the term mishpacha is not overplayed when you talk about this, right? A cast is tight knit. A cast is family. They're there to support each other. They don't pass judgment. You do what you got to do to make it all work. So, and this cast has clearly demonstrated that for us tonight.
Can I just say that's not always the case,
No.
And Joel Gray, our director, commented that in his career he's seen very few casts who kind of together have kindness and support for each other. And it really it is the thing that I would encourage young people to develop for themselves, is that you can have ambition and you can have drive and you can want to achieve, but not at the expense of a fellow player, and that it is all about interaction. So it's how you relate to others. And so you want to be helpful and healthy and loving and kind to your fellow players. And then I also love to remind to myself that it is called play, and it is play. And if it starts to feel too much like work or too dangerous of a place emotionally because of situations, you want to try and find a way to let it become lighter, because that's where creativity lives and where risk and dare can happen.
Got it.
I just want to say really quick, I think one of the things that was really, that helped shape the dynamic is none of us came into this thinking it was going to be the phenomenon that it became.
Right.
We signed on to this thinking, because this was supposed to be a 2-month run downtown at the Museum of Jewish Heritage. We all were supposed to be, unemployed Labor Day weekend of 2018. And I think each time we extended, each time something new happened, that was wonderful, finding out about our cast album, finding out we were moving uptown, winning the Drama Desk Awards, it just, the blessings kept coming. And I think there was this sense from all of us oh my gosh, is this really happening? It was not something we entered thinking it was going to be this gigantic thing. We were excited to do the show, take the challenge of doing it in Yiddish, work with Joel Gray, of course. Right. But I always thought from beginning to end that it gave us sort of a sense of humility, that we were all just so profoundly grateful that things happened the way they happened. And so that's what I would say to your students is when these things happen, cherish them, relish them, rejoice in them, because those are the experiences that you can hold on to when things aren't going so great.
Very profoundly said. Thank you. That was great. And I know at least from our house, as Kirk said, he knows my daughters and such. So anytime Kirk would post and say, "Hey, we're being extended," literally someone is running through the house that says, Fiddler's still going to stay on Broadway." I mean, it was exciting, and we shared the news with everybody. It's beautiful, and it's a testament to the work that you did, and a testament to the story that you were able to tell. It's a story that hits home, and we've talked about that all today. So I'm going to wrap because I've kept everyone so very long. But I just want to thank everybody, to our amazing panel, the cast of the original Yiddish Theater Folksbeine and production of Fiddle on the Roof in Yiddish. On behalf of the Theater Talent Showcase, it has been an absolute privilege to spend this evening chatting with all of you. And of course, you have an open invitation to come back anytime that you want. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. To our audience, I hope that you truly enjoyed this first Broadway Master Class at the Theater Talent Showcase. I'm hoping, again, to make this a regular monthly series. So stay tuned to our Facebook group and page for further announcements on the next event in the series, planned for sometime in early July. Coming up next Monday, on June 8th at 8 p.m. will be our next Live at the Theater Talent Showcase, our open mic night. Audition videos are being accepted up until Wednesday evening, 2 days from now at 11:59. And the 4 performers will be announced on Friday night as usual. And for anyone in our audience, if you enjoyed our live stream this evening and you are not yet a member, as well as the cast, if anyone would like to join our merry bunch here, please consider joining our group and being part of these exciting events and so much more. You can check us out on Facebook at Theater Talent Showcase. So thespians and theater fans are always welcome. So thank you very much. Thank you to this cast. Mwah, my appreciation and love to you all. We'll see you next time at the Theater Talent Showcase. So good night, everybody.
All right.
Thank you so much.